goodness. I'm just testing the microphone. You can all hear me? Yes? I'm Doreen Bolger, Director of the museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening. We'd like to thank our event co-sponsors this evening, the Print, Drawing, and Photograph Society and the Joshua Johnson Council. These are two of 5 Friends groups that offer special programs at the museum throughout the year. Friends groups offer unique opportunities to people who are interested in art and collecting. It gives you an opportunity to delve more deeply into the collection and exhibitions of the museum and to have access to museum expertise, particularly from our wonderful and talented curators. You can find out more about these groups tonight during the book signing and dessert reception that we'll be having in the garden room downstairs immediately following tonight's program. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Trenton Doyle Hancock, for the kickoff event of the fabulous 2012 Baltimore Contemporary Print Fair. Trenton's mythical world of mounds and vegans have populated his paintings, installations, prints, and drawings since the late 1990s. Trenton was raised in Paris, that's Paris, Texas, and he received his BFA from Texas A&M, his MFA from the Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia in 1998. Shortly after that, he was selected to participate in the Whitney Biennial in both 2000 and 2002, incredible recognition of his talent. Since then, Trenton's Boschian world has grown in size and scale, continually revealing more about the creatures whose epic struggles are biblical in scope. This is Trenton's second trip to Baltimore this year, as he came for an artist residency at MICA in February. And during that time, he created a first ever print fair poster, as well as a benefit print. You'll hear more about those projects in a moment. We're very, very grateful to him for his generosity of time and talent on Baltimore's behalf. He's really been very generous. Joining Trenton on stage tonight will be Ann Shafer, Assistant Curator of Prints, Drawings, and Photographs, who coordinated this year's print fair, along with curatorial assistant Ben Levy. I'd really like to thank both Ann and Ben for organizing this evening and for all their hard work on the print fair. There are a myriad of details, and they have taken care of all of them with grace. I hope you'll all attend the print fair this weekend. It's a wonderful opportunity to see great art and to learn more about what is happening in contemporary printmaking. We're very excited that this year, there are a dozen other print-related exhibitions and events all over Baltimore this weekend, and they're loosely connected to our print fair here in the museum. There's going to be a Station North Final Friday and Baltimore Print Studios open house in central Baltimore. There'll be the 3rd annual Open Space Publications and Multiples Fair, which is an amazing 3rd annual, and right near where you get off Route 83 on 28th Street, so check that out. And more at Goya Contemporary, Grimaldus Gallery, Gallery 4, and Nudishank, and other venues all around town. We're honored to have Trenton with us this evening and look forward to hearing his thoughts and insights. So please welcome Trenton Doyle Hancock and Ann Shafer.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. All right, we've got lots to talk about, but before we get to Trenton and all of his weirdly wonderful stuff, I have a couple points of housekeeping. I want to thank Doreen and Jay and Rena for their support through all of this preparation time for the print fair, and for Trenton for coming and doing the residency in February at MICA, and so gracefully doing not only the benefit print, but also the poster. And I'd like to thank MICA for making that all happen, particularly Gail Deary and Mary Mashburn. Doreen basically told you the gist of what's going on this weekend, so hopefully you'll avail yourselves of all of the opportunities. It's going to be something else. All right. As you see on the screen, we've got a number to text questions to, which hopefully, if we have time, we'll get to some of them, or maybe more than some. And avail yourselves of that. If you want to have more information about the print fair and all of the events going on, that's the website. We have a page just for the print fair, and on it is a sheet that includes all of the collateral events that are going on around town. So take a look at that. I did want to put in a plug immediately for the benefit print, which Trenton did with Micah down the street in February. And we'll talk more about the sort of ins and outs of it, but I wanted to flash that up there and remind people that it's not only the most reasonable print you'll see for sale this weekend, but a fabulous thing to have. We'll talk about it more. So we're going to talk a lot about prints because it's the print fair, of course. But before we did that, I wanted to take a look at some of the really huge and large-scale works that Trenton has done in the past couple of years, including a mural for a children's hospital down in Houston, which was just completed. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've done?
Well, first, I just want to say it's good to be here, and thank you all for coming out. There's many things you could be doing with your day, and you chose to spend it with us, and I appreciate that. So it's good to be here. And so this piece is called High and High, and it's a mural, but sort of my new, melding of wallpaper and drawing and all kinds of things into this one form. It's at a children's hospital in Houston, Texas, and I worked with RX Art, this institution out of New York, who their whole mission is to put art in children's hospitals around the country. And so I was happy to work with them on this. And so we placed this outside of the radiology unit of Herman Memorial's Children's Hospital. And I don't know, it gave me a chance to explore the medicinal aspects of art making and the healing qualities of art. So that was exciting.
And it features a mound, which is probably life-size, because they get to be this
They
enormous.
get a little bigger than that, but yeah, that one is that's as big as he got in his lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, the piece is based on a work. Actually, that was my first print series that I did with Flatbed Press, and I don't know when that was, 2002, I guess. The By and By series, where there
By
was
and By, which we own,
Yeah,
and which is
well,
hanging inside the print fair on the wall. as
Is
you
it
walk
hanging?
in.
Okay.
Yes, you'll all be able to see it if you come back.
There you go. Well, you can draw the correlation between this, which has all these happy animals, and then that one, which has all these crying animals, because this mound, that character died, and they're grieving. But in this one, it's like I went back in time to tell a little bit of a happier moment in this mound's life.
Well, and maybe we should say a little bit about the structure of the world you've created. There's sort of a battle between two races. One is the mounds, which are these big black and white striped things that often have pink oozing sores. Not in this case, but in other cases. Mm-hmm. And they are often attacked by a species called the vegans.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And they're mean and nasty.
They can be.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm interested in the absurd, obviously, and that's why I strung together, what's a group of people I could make fun of that would make no sense because they're really innocuous and peace-loving, and it's like, okay, I'll pick on vegans. Why not? I guess they were my stand-ins for Christians or something.
Well, vegans are altruistic. They think they're doing the best thing for the planet and for their bodies, and you've turned them sort of on their head. And
yeah, it's like, if you go to any extreme, there's the possibility that things can sort of go wrong. So I like to exploit the wrong stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with those characters. And the mounds, they aren't necessarily good, they just are. But then there's other characters that are trying to be good. But they run into their own problems and complications as well, so, yeah.
Okay. And then you did a giant mural for Cowboys Stadium in Dallas.
Uh-huh.
And these are all vinyl prints, so you've generated a drawing that became digital and was printed on
Right.
a huge, huge, huge scale.
Right. So I worked with, basically just went old school and did drawings and then scan those drawings in and then manipulate them in the computer and then build this new image and color it, in the program. So, and then I've been working with billboard designers too. So it was a pretty kind of, it was accidental. Like when I was approached to do this piece called From a Legend to a Choir for the Cowboys Stadium, I originally was going to work with the Philadelphia Mural Council and just get it done, straight up like a mural, painted.
Yeah.
And I don't know, ran into some issues of time, and I don't know, there was all this bureaucratic stuff, and then the option came up to work with these more local billboard people who hadn't really worked with fine artists, and but I'm like, well, I would be using their facilities like a print shop, basically. So I went in and worked with their guy that basically put together just ads, pizza ads and sports ads and stuff. It was like, well, we're going to use your talents in a different way, and we basically collaborated for several months to build this thing. And I was like, wow, this is just like working in a print shop. I mean,
with the same byproduct of making you slow down and
right.
think very carefully, because each step is deliberate and has to be deliberate.
Right, yeah, you're thinking in layers and, what's going to be legible at what point, and, to have it's like this is the biggest print that I've ever made, so it's 108 feet wide and 3 stories tall.
Wow.
So it was like, okay, what what are you going to see at what level, and, so the issue of time came to play in this, like, in a different way than other prints that I'd made.
Does it follow a narrative? Is there a sort of a comic book panel storyline that goes through it, or?
Not necessarily,
Or
but
all
there's
over?
moments where are surprises. Like you'll kind of come past a pillar, and what's past it is a head of this weird creature, and then there's a few moments when there's kind of nothing. I mean, there's never nothing, but then there's these hot spots, if you will.
Okay. All right, and then this one in Seattle at the Olympic Sculpture Park.
Yeah, so that is a huge sculpture that's 50 feet long and made out of aluminum, and it's built in layers. So I worked with these fabricators in Seattle to get this thing done. And originally it was going to be like a carnival game. Like I wanted people to come in and bring their plastic tops, their unrecyclable refuse, and throw it through those holes in the hand, and they would funnel down, and it was just going to be this crazy thing. And then we ran into some issues of you can't have people throwing stuff at your artwork, and just some. So yeah, I cried about that for a night, and then got back to the drawing board and figured out, well, we can maintain the vitrine aspects where the tops are to be placed. So
See the little kid in the center is standing by a vitrine, and there's red at his feet. Those are containers where you toss your tops into.
right, so each one is color coded. So there was like 9 of them, and you bring in your plastic and put in there. And over the course of 2 years, it was supposed to be like a gauge as to what colors were the most popular, or that kind of thing.
And do we know how full they are now?
Well, I don't. They haven't sent me the paperwork on how full
We need to
they
find
are.
out.
It just came down actually, so.
Oh, it did? Oh.
That piece is all packed up in Dallas somewhere.
Oh, I thought it was going to be up forever.
I wish.
Oh,
There's a chance it could be up forever in another location, though.
Uh-huh.
So I'll keep you posted.
that's right. Things to come.
Things to come.
Okay. This is, I think, my favorite part about your work in the last couple of years. Trenton was approached by Ballet Austin to collaborate with a composer and I think the director to create a ballet. And it obviously is about Trenton's mythic world, the mounds and the vegans. There they all are. And can you tell us a little bit about working with the ballet troupe?
Well, it was an interesting collaboration because, going into it and being approached, I'd never even thought about going to a ballet, much less making one. So it was a real surprise and a real risk. And I think I knew that, and Stephen, the choreographer, he knew that as well. but we were both excited to make something that was sort of a bit out of the realm of how we were normally working. You know, me kind of placed right in the white walls of the gallery, and then him doing, you know, Swan Lake and other very, you know, mainstream stuff. I mean, he had,
Decidedly not Swan Lake.
no, but he had actually ventured out to do, he did a play on the Holocaust where, I mean, some kind of brave and risky things. And I was like, okay. I saw his production of that, and after that I got a better sense of who I was working with. And it was then that I realized, okay, this is someone I feel like I can collaborate with.
What's the smoke coming out of the mound doing?
Well, a little head's going to pop out of that area. So, I mean, they did all kinds of fun stuff on the stage. So it was built over the course of 3 years,
Wow.
and we worked with Graham Reynolds, who's a composer who's done work in theater and film, and I also worked with the Fabric Workshop out of Philadelphia to do one of the backdrops.
And then there's a character in the mythic world called Painter, who is, you see on the right here in the beautiful colored dress, and who I think that her role is one of the most important in the story. Can you tell us about her?
Well, her role in this in my universe, she's the reason we can see color. She's this sort of goddess or the spirit energy that is the giver of color. And so for the purposes of the ballet, I had to figure out her humanoid form, which is something I had never thought of. It's just like when color appears in my paintings, that's the presence of Painter, but had never considered what she would be like, you know, dancing on the stage. So when it came time to design her costume, that was you know, it was a fun challenge. It was I had to dig deep for that, and but for this particular story, she meets this vegan, or she visits him in his dreams. He's a vegan priest he desires something more than just hating mounds and this black and white existence. So she offers to him color, and he has to preach this message of color to the other vegans. And so the story starts to unfold literally color by color, and then it builds to a crescendo. And then there's a character who's sort of the Darth Vader character that he's anti-color, and he starts to kill the color. So the play or the ballet goes from darkness to color, then back to darkness.
And I've been reading about you lately, no surprise there, that the color, you draw it back to Genesis and God's promise, the rainbow as God's promise. So there's, not only is the story huge and expansive, but it's biblical in some senses.
Well, I think, yeah, a lot of my stories have that kind of tenor to them.
You did name him Saint Sesame, did you
Yes,
not?
Sesame, yeah. Which
Moses
is,
backwards.
so, yeah, he was sent to deliver these vegans out of their doldrum. But the work tends to be multi-layered in that, you know, and that is definitely one lens you can look through to, I guess, read the work, or if you're looking for those themes, they're definitely there. But sometimes it's after the fact. You know, I'll write these things out or draw them out or do X amount of paintings and then look back on it and say, oh my goodness, that's like this Bible story that I grew up with, or something. There's a moral to it, and it harkens back to, I don't know, some kind of parable. So sometimes I'm as surprised as anyone else that stuff pops up in the way that it does.
Just a reminder, if you haven't been texting, that's the number. I'm going to keep going. Okay, so
people are meant to text now.
yeah, I have several questions on my phone as we speak, in fact.
Oh, that's what was happening?
Yeah, that's what was happening.
God.
Exactly. My husband wants to know. No, just kidding. Let's see. Our great friend Noel wants to know if you're going to make a comic book ever. You started out sort of in comics.
Where's this thing that...
Where is that thing?
It's under here,
It's
huh?
under there.
Well, there's one. I don't know. The Trenton Doyle Handbook. I don't know how easy they are to get anymore, but that's a comic. But it's based on Marvel Universe, which was my favorite comics growing up because it was more like an encyclopedia. That was my first experience with fine art, was reading the encyclopedias and looking at the pictures as a kid. And so I kind of took that to, when I started reading comics, I was so happy to find that, oh my goodness, Marvel and DC also have their own version of encyclopedias, and they're just as verbose and profusely illustrated. And I was like, wow, I kind of, I guess, co-opted that into my hand, and started building my own characters and giving them stats and histories, and that became more interesting sometimes than telling the stories. Just building the characters, and then the stories will fall into place after that.
You talked about setting yourself in graduate school a mission statement where you wanted to have something that you could, a story, a world that you could attack from any media, or you could move around in time and weave the story that wasn't necessarily linear, and which I thought was brilliant, frankly. Did the story sort of pop fully formed, or do things sort of come? How do they come?
Well, the idea of a narrative or a story didn't come until after grad school, but it was almost immediately after, when I had moved away from Philly and was in this residency program, which basically allowed me to unpack all of the stuff that I'd been holding back or stewing over in graduate school and before. So it was this sort of clear, open space to just say, okay, I've built all of this stuff to this crescendo, and now what? How do I use it? But yes, during even undergrad and grad school, I was interested in characters like Martin Kippenberger, who, I was looking at his oeuvre and noticing that he could get away with anything. It's like, here's this guy who had ownership, seemingly, of all of pop culture, and could approach it in a serious way, but most oftentimes it'd be from this kind of snarky, critical way. And it's like, oh, I want to do that too, but how do I do it, and what do I do it with? So I feel like those earlier years were all about gathering up the momentum and the tools to then get to this place where, okay, I had them all almost as if in a closet, and had this empty canvas. It was like, how do I make sense out of all of this stuff? And the idea of narration just felt natural because of the idea of asking questions. It's like one question led yet to another series of questions, and when I laid all those out, it was in the form of narration. It was like, okay, so you have these mound characters and vegan characters, and they weren't necessarily related in school, but it's like, well, what is the relationship between them? So that was a question. So I had to figure out that link. And the link was a series of paintings. It wasn't necessarily more writing. It was like this almost rebus-like, where there's text, and then smack dab in the middle of that is image. And it kind of built that way. So
It's amazing. The more you delve into the world, I'm like, wow, where did that come from? I mean, it's sort of biblical, but it's more structured like a dream. I mean, it's really, you can just snatch any part of it and start going off on another tangent. It's really wonderful. And do it in prints or installation or paintings. It's a piece of smart, if you ask me.
well, thank you.
You're welcome. This is two of the prints from By and By, which is the series that we have in the collection, and which is installed as you first walk into the print fair. Do you want to tell us what's going on in the series? There's 9 of them, 9 sad etchings.
So this is that moment in time where I said that one big, plump, healthy mound passed away, and he was attacked by a band of angry vegans, and they stripped him of all of his fur and his precious mound meat, and what was left was this perfect tree, this white tree in the forest with a skull sitting on the top. Because mounds are half plant, half human, they kind of maintain, that's like, well, that was another question. It's like, well, what does a mound skeleton look like? And I basically solved that problem in these prints. Answer, is that from the thing too?
It wasn't me.
Oh. So yeah, this is gave me an there's 11 of these, so 2 of them are the mound. There's like the mound's body, the skeleton, the close-up of the skull, and then the next images in the series are just animals. Like there's the lion, a squirrel, and elephants, and so on and so forth. And they're all giving their eulogies or speaking in their own vernacular, you know, what the mound meant to them. And so that also gave me another opportunity to explore this absurd things like, oh, what if animals could talk? What would they really say? And it's like, so that was fun.
When you go in, you'll have to take a good close look at them because there's text coming out of each of them has a speech bubble, as it were, and the ostrich's head is in the mud, but there's a speech bubble coming up out of the burbling up out of the mud.
Out of the different holes in the ground.
Yeah, they're pretty great. All right, then, let's see. This is from '05, the Ossified Theosified, which you did with Harlan and Weaver, who are here tonight.
Yeah, are they?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, they're, so that was a series of 9 or so colored etchings, and these are attached to that series of Saint Sesame and the, you know, the Cult of Color. And I gave myself the challenge of wanting to use a lot of color, and I wanted them to be pure etching too. So I didn't want to do any hand coloring. I've never been a fan of it. I don't know why. So as kind of punkish as I can be in the studio, I'm still a purist in some ways. So that's what I told them, and they just were like, how many colors do you want to use? And so we ended up using a ton of plates for all of these, but it was a great residency.
And what the things in the hand are?
Eggs that had been cracked open or aborted. That particular piece is called Aborted But Beautiful.
Unhappy things happen.
They do.
This is the colophon for the next one, Fix, which you did with Brodsky. The folks from Brodsky just unloaded their things this afternoon, so they'll be here over the weekend.
Yeah.
And here's some of the prints from that series.
So this is still part of the Saint Sesame series, but closer to the end where things are getting a little bit more tortured, and there's an air of paranoia in the underworld. So these images are a little bit more enigmatic, I think, than the ossified images I did with Harlan and Weaver.
Can you tell us about the mound meat, which is what that MM is standing for?
Yeah, that leads right back to the title. It's like these vegans, in order to see color, they have to take hits of mound meat like it's a drug, because it does weird things to their body, like the combination of intense meditation and introducing this foreign thing, which they're not built to take in or understand, makes them see colors, and they get, you know, addicted to it. So that's the meaning of fix. So I kind of charted, are these I guess it's 20 images, is a chart of that, I don't know, degradation.
It reminds me of the movie Pleasantville, which I don't know if you've ever seen, but where it's all in black and white, and suddenly the one housewife is able to see color because she's experienced sexual elation, and so it's almost like she's preaching and trying to convert the rest of, you know, the neighbors.
It's got that kid that played Spider-Man in it, right?
Right. It's the same thing, but yours is a little darker in that it's a drug. And in their case, it was just sort of society was not ready to change and move to the next level. It's a fascinating parallel, but this color being, you know, the end all be all. Can you tell us about the sort of tombstone eyes, that the character? He's appearing a lot lately.
Well, that in this series of etchings, well, actually etchings / litho and silkscreen, so I combined all of that. Some of these have all of those examples in the piece, but I worked with the Neiman Center at Columbia to do these a few years back, and this was sort of toward the end of the Saint Sesame work. I basically worked on that series for almost 7 years, and this is toward the end where I knew the characters were dying off. Even in my head, just emotionally, I was ready to kill them and get on with something else. And I boiled down the essence of what I thought those vegans were that were hiding in the underworld and doing these strange things away from pure eyes, became this head form with like you said, the tombstone eyes. But originally, that form were these characters that were peeking from behind rocks and from around corners, and like they were kind of like scared or paranoid. And I took that and started to build worlds around that form. And that became more interesting actually than, okay, I know where this story is going, but what's the next story? And so I felt like that head gave me a gateway into getting into whatever this next phase was. And eventually that head became my head. And that's where my work is currently. It's like working with these kind of self-portrait things. But there was a moment there where I was using that form and exploiting the space around it, the space within the head, and then the space within those two eyes, and seeing how many different ways I could expand or contract, and I don't know, different combinations of pattern, and just build a new kind of character.
What I have noticed, and Ben and I were talking about this at lunch today, that you, it seems like earlier on the narrative was being played out in sort of scenes where lots of things were happening, or it was a moment where there was some action going on. And it seems that over the last few years, it's starting to pare back to a single person figure where you're exploring kind of the emotional moment instead of the action.
Well, I'm glad you noticed that, because no, it's actually the shift that happened after the ballet. Because there was a body of work called the fear paintings that I did, which were me first dealing with that form, isolated like that head form. And so I had these 8 paintings that were 4 on top and 4 on the bottom, and I hung them, salon style like that in the space. And they were 5 by 5 feet, each one of them. So when you walk in, seeing one of them by itself is like, oh yeah, that's sort of a big painting, maybe medium size, but you see them all together and it's this huge situation. And and I stepped back from it and realized, and this was the first body of work I had done right after the ballet. Didn't know what I was going to do after that, or how I was going to digest that experience and then have it manifest itself in the studio. And then I realized, I'm now using the wall as stage and the painting as character, as opposed to each painting being, like you said, a stage with characters to interact.
Right.
I felt like I'd exploited that and done so much of that it had gotten, there's many different reasons your studio propels itself to new places, but I feel like one of the reasons is you exhaust, possibilities. And I felt like, that felt new. It felt like the place to be.
Then you did a month residency in Singapore with the Tyler Print Institute there, which looked like an amazing experience.
That was insane. I was actually over there for 2 months in total. That is a weird place, Singapore.
Dear Ken. Okay.
I enjoyed myself, but man, it was culture shock because it felt familiar being there at first. I was like, they were occupied by England for a while, so there's this residue of that. But then there was this other stuff that was suppressed or repressed, and it manifested itself like the ugly things in society came up, bubbling out of holes or surfaces that were like, they're trying to hide that. And I felt like I was in the middle of my work, and that's kind of the theme that I was just like, okay, these characters are trying to hide something and stay hidden and keep this beautiful and pure thing over the top, but there's this kind of weirdness bubbling from under the surface, and that made its way into the work, and I was real excited to be there because of it.
But they ended up being not monoprints, but unique works with cuts and things coming through and layers and...
Yeah, when I went over there, I just had to get rid of the idea that these, like, they didn't even think in terms of making series of work. It's not why they invited me over there to do, you know, additions. It was more about, we're going to make, like, how can you confuse the process of printmaking, drawing, and painting, and make these new hybrid things. And once I, you know, got over that, you know, through that, we were just excited and experimenting and doing all kinds of stuff. Like the pieces you're looking at there, 7 by 10 feet each.
Paper.
And paper.
Paper.
So, and yeah, their paper making facility is ridiculous. It was, I had never gave a shit about making paper. To be completely honest, it just never interested me. It's like, oh, we can put leaves in it and stuff. Like, what? I don't care. But I got over there and they're like, oh no, you can do all this and it's so flexible and you can actually make these things that are just as, I don't know, bold as your painted marks with paper. And then we really got down to it, you know.
Let's see what, oh, this was the last one.
Yeah, that's, we done all we could and none of it's good. Yeah.
So this is, I mean, words appear a lot, but there's a lot of work where text and image are paired. Sometimes the image sits on a wall that's hand painted by you with the text. And I keep reading where you feel like it's concrete poetry, but it does tend to make sense. There is a narrative in the text.
I mean, yeah, I use the word concrete poetry, I guess, rather loosely, but just the visual nature of word like text or font or whatever, and how that can be broken down and then turned into image. But then there's the image that's projected into your head from reading a word. And so I try to find a balance between that kind of poetry and what the image is and how poetic can how much leeway is there in the image versus the word. And if they're going to be married together, then it becomes a fight, or you just have to really develop that relationship between the two in order to...
They're parallel, so the words aren't they're not captions for the image, and the image is not illustrating the word.
But I do come from a comic book background, like even a cartoonist background, so there is that aspect sometimes of having the caption be, you know, meant to double back into the image. Okay. But I don't know, I try to figure out how many combinations of it can I use, and it's all about timing. Sometimes you use this combination here, sometimes it's just the text that you need, sometimes the image says it all. I guess right now I'm at a place where I'm really experimenting again from being kind of, I think, strict on myself about those relationships for a while, and now I'm kind of having fun again.
That's good. What I love about your art is that there's an element of, you're obviously a fine art artist. There's high and there's low. There's this wonderful melding of the two, and sometimes they butt up to each other, but sometimes they're beautifully integrated. And I love reading about how people love to lay influences on you, like Philip Guston, because of the pink, which seems a bit artificial. And when you're asked, you'll come up with the animator Ralph Bakshi, who did the 1978 Lord of the Rings animated version, or Marvin Glass, the toy designer who did Mousetrap, Light Bright, Rock'em Sock'em Robots, everything that you and I remember from our childhood.
Right.
Can you talk about your love of the toy and all the...
Well, yeah, the issue of high and low has never really been an issue to me because I never saw the distinction or never allowed myself to, I guess, be corrupted by the distinction. So it's like I said, going back to, I got a comic book in one hand and an encyclopedia with, I don't know, Titian and, I don't know, whoever else. And it's like, well, they're the same. It just felt the same to me. Because I guess in terms of achievement, I was trying to get my hand to do what both of them were doing. and I don't know, even package design. You know, I was a weird kid. I was looking at all of that stuff, and it factored into what quality was. Of course, as any kid, I loved toys when I was little, but I think I loved them differently maybe. Like I would get them, and it was about setting them up and then studying them. And you know, if I got He-Man, I'm studying the musculature. It's like, where does this muscle fit? And then, you know, looking at Spider-Man comic books and going, why do they draw the muscles differently? Like, well, these are more amplified and cartoony muscles over here. And then, so I was actually building that kind of, I don't know, figuring out what those...
Vocabulary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in my head back then. In Garbage Pail Kids, which, you know, I would collect those cards and look at them and go, how could such abject material be painted so nicely? And that was, I loved it. I mean, I think I loved it on the level as any other kid. Like it's gross out humor, but it felt smart to me and it felt important too. So when it came time, I got older and it came time to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I was like, well, I want to do what whoever those crazy guys are that made that stuff, I want to do that too. So I feel like in some ways when I'm making images, you know, it has to stand up to the quality of the toys I played with or the pulp that I was, slept with under my pillow. It's like this stuff, you know, it's got to be visually, it's just got to hold up.
You now, as an adult, have a rather extensive toy collection.
I do.
Go.
Okay. Yeah, I've went through a period where this started about 12 years ago, where I was actively started to buy back all the toys that I had lost as a child, and
Lost in...
or were burned or were given away.
Say more.
And then it turned into, and it was about scavenging, going to thrift shops and flea markets, and it was in a way like rediscovering my childhood. And this was just pre-internet when the internet existed, but it wasn't like I could go to this toy site and see a list of everything I wanted. So I think going to these flea markets, it was like walking down memory lane, and it was satisfying a part of my mind that I felt had died or something. And it activated this part of me that was, okay, I'm going to start collecting and gathering these things for this immediate satisfaction of jogging my memory. And then it turned into this larger project of collecting culture and analyzing culture, and then I started to see how that doubled back and fed into the paintings and the other work. But it's definitely snowballed or whatever.
You got the bug.
Yeah.
So here you've got almost no there's sort of an image there, but it's really heavy text. Not heavy meaning, but heavily text, which is almost brand new. Graphic Studio, I hope, brought it with them. They're here tonight too.
Yeah, I'll be signing those tomorrow. Like, I guess.
Hot off the presses.
Hundreds of them.
Yeah.
But no, this image was meant to be kind of a funerary image or an homage. My stepfather, who raised me, was the minister, passed away a few years ago, and this is something that he would say all the time. And he was actually very interested in the idea of death and this passage from this life to whatever the next life is, and knowing that people from this world can't go into the other to give things or to make those kinds of gestures. So he would always say, "Give me my flowers while I yet live." So that phrase has now been co-opted into my greater library of poetry.
I like them. Okay, now we get to talk about your experience here in February at MICA with the Globe Collection and Dolphin Press and Print, and you see a whole host of people here. Most of these folks are sitting in the audience tonight. And just for your information, notice the posters up at the upper left there. Those are examples of older Globe posters that had come along with the collection of wood type and die cuts that Bob, who's sitting in the plaid shirt there, had finally decided to let go, and they've been matriculated into the MICA world, so students and artists can work with them, which is kind of cool, and what we based the print fair poster on. Did you have fun?
I had an amazing time. Yeah, I mean, it was not only fun, it was an intensive sort of 3 days that we worked.
3, yeah.
To make 2 full-size prints. I don't know who that guy is, but yeah, so it was great meeting Bob, who has this, great history with Globe and feeding this basically a whole aesthetic back into our culture, into pop culture. Those Globe posters. I mean, everybody knows them when they see them. Maybe they don't know the name Globe, but they can say, "Oh yeah, that's." When I see that look, I see Ray Charles, or I see, these great R&B gods, and it was amazing to see from whence those images came, because I'd never actually given it that much thought. But the archive is, I don't know,
it's phenomenal.
Daunting,
yeah.
to say the least.
And you said that, well, which is interesting because you're in your childhood noticing toy packaging and the artwork that comes along with the garbage pail kids and all that stuff,
Right.
but to not have the same questions about the genesis of the imagery that is the posters is sort of interesting. They were so sort of, you're so used to them that you didn't ever see them and think about them.
Right, yeah, I just never thought about the source.
Yeah.
Maybe if I was more of a music person and went to more shows or something, I would be, maybe my foot would have already been in that door somehow, but that look had sort of been worked into my paintings, like, okay, the kind of specific math that's involved in those images, like the kind of symmetry and it's like weight of the letters and that kind of stuff, and how the heads pop up and float around. So it was great to hear why, just on a design level. Well, here's why we made the text look like that, and here's why we shortened this word, which was 8 letters long to 4 letters because it was an efficiency issue. And it's like, oh, and here's why the heads are floating like that, and here's why some are smaller and some are bigger, and here's why there's heads on here at all. It's just, oh, okay. It's just, Bob is just a storehouse of information.
That is true. And so hopefully you've all seen the print fair poster around town, I hope. But there's Trenton and me doing a little, and then there's Floating Heads. There's Frankie Lyman and Mahalia Jackson and
Michael Jackson
and the Jackson 5.
The Jackson 5 too.
The inside joke being that all of the Globe posters were hanging in the windows of the Meyerhoff Symphony Hall, and multiple members of the public would go into the symphony and say, is the Jackson 5 playing? So Trenton, tongue-in-cheek, decided to include them on our poster too. It was funny. All right, let's see what else we got. So let's talk about the benefit print and this sort of moving into self-portraiture. What's going on there?
Well, before there was me thinking about using my head as the image there, I came up with this, what was it, a palindrome? Yeah, I came up with a palindrome that was MICA specific, and actually the longest palindrome I'd ever written.
Right, it's here somewhere. There it is.
There we go. And just, the word kiln popped up, Baltimore there, and sex, acid, sin, taxes. It was just weird. It's like it really unfolded and made a kind of weird cosmic sense. And then the head also has in the glasses area a little, it's like a play on words in there too. But
You, Mike, and me.
yeah,
Yeah.
I won't get into all of that.
Really?
No, I won't.
Okay. And then, so these are some of the ways in which this all came together. Ben took a portrait of Trenton the first day you got there, and it got turned into a screen. And then these were some of the sketches that had been in your folder when you got there,
Right.
ideas for what was going to come. And then here's some of the wonderfully beautiful wood type that's part of the Globe collection that
Yeah.
got used. And then,
How did I get in there?
I got him.
Wow, you're good.
At some point, he said, I have this folio with me of some drawings. So I took shots of everything in there, including his handwritten calendar for April, which had my name on it.
Oh, look at you.
And so there are a lot more than just these two. But I was fascinated to see sort of this, exploration of eyeballs,
Yeah.
a mound of eyeballs.
A mound of eyeballs. Well, when I travel, I just fill up sketchbooks basically with collage material, things I can cut up when I get home and glue into paintings. Because
So that's what's going on here. You've cut out an eyeball and used it.
I cut it out and used
Gotcha. Okay.
it. So
So it's your stock.
it's a stock image
Photos, okay.
file.
All right, sweet. And then there were a couple others in there that were pretty fun.
Oh boy. We went to town.
I had my phone with me, and so I took pictures.
I see.
What's a girl to do?
So, okay, yeah, there's Torpedo Boy beating up some vegans, or he himself is getting beat up, I don't know.
Well, so we haven't seen Torpedo Boy appear, so can we talk a little bit about him? He's your alter ego-ish?
Well, yeah,
Sort
he's
of.
a character I invented in the 4th grade, and he's been with me for that long, and he is me, and I would take off my glasses and become Torpedo Boy and start saving people's lives. That was my thing. And so I grew up, and he came back into the work, but in a different way. He was more flawed when I reintroduced him, and I figured, how does he fit into this whole mythology? That there's mounds and these vegan characters. What is his role? And I figured that he was the son of a painter and Lloyd, who are the two spirit energies, and they sent him to Earth to protect these mounds from the vegans. But he's kind of I don't know, he's irresponsible with his power. So he doesn't always show up on time, he abuses his gift, and to me he's sort of like, I've come to know him as my artist side, maybe. Like you, as the artist, you are gifted with all of this power, but as Stan Lee says, with great power comes great responsibility. And so I guess off and on, as I've been building his history, I've also been exploring those themes of responsibility with him. And I think he's going to appear in the next few years after I spend some time dealing with myself and learning who I am and my role in the work in this more meta kind of way. I think then I can, that'll give way to learning how to deal with him again differently.
He's been resting for a bit?
He's taking a hiatus.
Okay. All right, and then, so we're circling back to the poster. This is Bob setting the type that might appear or might not. I think, the poster,
Yeah, that's
which he did in half an hour flat. The man works very fast.
That's amazing.
Yeah, crazy fast. Oh, and then this is the team of students that helped
I-
put the whole thing together. We're all right here, that's right. With all the great Globe posters above them. It was really something. And this is the drawing that Trenton arrived with. That was the beginning of this idea for the print fair poster, where he's wearing a little beanie cap and barking at me. Yeah. There were several photos of me in various guises, and he said to me, "So I'm going to put a dunce cap on you."
Just messing with you.
So it didn't turn out that way, thank goodness. He gave me a
You
mortarboard instead.
That's way more accurate. Way more accurate.
And of course, the color's okay, actually. It's printed in the pink's really wonderful in pop. It's a fluorescent pink. It looks fantastic. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and say, "Can I have have one. They're not for sale, people. Okay, and then just to circle back to the benefit print, and thank you again for doing it. The proceeds from the benefit print are being shared between Micah's artist residency programs, which Trenton was basically the first to enjoy, and acquisitions for the museum. So those funds will be split, and we'll be able to buy something terrific for the collection. And it will provide Micah with the ability to host another artist in the coming years to work in the same manner with the Globe collection. So it's really quite something. One last character question. I heard from a little fly on the wall that there's a new character about to make a debut.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
And who might that be?
His name was Frog?
Oh, Punk Frog.
Punk Frog.
Yeah.
Do tell.
Punk Frog is a character I made up in undergrad. So I guess right at the end of undergrad, moving into grad school. And I didn't do any real fleshed out paintings with him, but I kind of was like, oh, what if Kermit the Frog was a teenager and he was like a punk and he was like smoking blunts and graffitiing surfaces and, you know, just a young kid doing stuff. What would that be like? So I started building these Punk Frog characters out of felt, and I did a few painted versions of it. But then he sort of got squashed under the weight of the mounds and forgotten about for years and years. And now that I'm in this fresh place again, it's like, oh, who can I dig up and breathe life back into? And so he's one of those characters that's like, oh, what's he all about? And I figured that he's my son of sorts. And so I'm interested in exploring this relationship where I'm in the work and I'm working, building this mound universe, and then Punk Frog walks in and is like, so Dad, when are you going to start making paintings about me? And so that then there's this father-son sort of tension thing that goes on, and we'll see where that ends up, but I don't think it ends well. Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, it's been a clear hour, so I think we're going to wrap it up. And I'd like to thank Trenton for coming, and you all for being here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.